Fun fact, I actually saw Presence a whole year ago. That's right, it had its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival, and I was kind of surprised when Neon picked it up for a mainstream theatrical release, and even more surprised when I saw the trailers because they're selling it as a horror movie, and having seen this a year ago, unless they really changed it, it's not really a horror movie. But I digress. Now, Presence is about a family that moves into a house filled with, as the title suggests, a supernatural presence. Now, I'm sure I can be forgiven for rolling my eyes when I heard the logline for this movie, as I've seen my share of haunted house movies and was wary of anything being added to this well-worn genre. Heck, they made Poltergeist. To me, that's the king of these movies, and you really don't need to make any more. However, it's directed by Steven Soderbergh and written by David Koepp. And those two guys definitely had me interested, and sure enough, they do completely subvert expectations, making this a supernatural tale that's very, very light on horror, to the point that I actually think a lot of horror fans are going to be pissed off when they see this movie next week, but is heavy on heart and should play really well upon repeat viewings. Now, the big selling point is surely going to be the way the movie is filmed. You see, Soderbergh's camera is always taken here from the perspective of the presence itself, and nobody uses the term ghost, making this kind of an interesting visual exercise. The family in the film is always observed from an arm's length, kind of similar to the way that Rooney Mara's character was in A Ghost Story several years ago. As the audience, we are basically in the shoes of the presence on Ghost the whole time, and the camera basically floats around the house like it doesn't have a body, and that's a pretty interesting way to shoot a movie. Another thing that's kind of cool is that the presence itself isn't necessarily malignant, nor is it even aware of why it's in their home in the first place. So the movie centers around Kalina Lang's Chloe, a young girl who's mourning the death of her best friend from an opioid overdose, making this pretty timely. Her brother, Eddie Maddei's Tyler, has a cruel streak and chases popularity at school, and is quite mean to her throughout the film. At the same time, her mother, who's played by Lucy Liu, is a real estate mogul who's often drunk and seems on the verge of being arrested for some pretty serious white-collar crimes we never really learn the details of. Luckily, Chloe's father, played by This Is Us star Chris Sullivan, who worked with Soderbergh on The Knick, is more of a supportive presence in her life, but he's also preoccupied with the notion that his wife's crimes, in a lot of ways, make him just as guilty in the eyes of the law, and both of them may be looking at some serious jail time that's going to separate them from their kids and definitely put an end to the upper middle class lifestyle they've grown accustomed to. Chloe is also pursued romantically by an older boy played by Wes Mulholland, whom the presence seems to be trying to make her stay away from. More than anything, Presence seems like a filmmaking exercise for Soderbergh, with him using technological innovations over the last few years to give the film a unique identity. It continues the experimental vibe that he kicked off following his short-lived early retirement, and I will definitely take something like this over his watered-down Magic Mike's Last Dance, which is probably the least sexy movie ever made about strippers, any day. By nature, Presence is a film that you have to be patient with, and, as I said before, it's going to piss off a lot of genre fans because it's not really a horror movie, and the style of the movie takes a long time to get into because of how unconventional it is. I must admit that for the first 20 minutes or so, I was kind of bored and looking at my watch and wondering, how long is this going to go on for? Until, suddenly, I started to really get into it. It becomes emotionally grounded, and the stakes get higher and higher, and the film really starts to work. The cast is excellent, with Kalina Lang a real find in the film's most important role, but I also really liked Eddie Maddei, who initially comes off as a nearly sociopathic bully. But as the film goes on, the better side of his character starts to peer through a bit. Meanwhile, Chris Sullivan is touching as the overwhelmed but loving father who also lives to regret his culpability in whatever crimes his wife might have committed. Lucy Liu is nuanced as the loving but very preoccupied, anxious, and often drunk mother who knows her time is running out and tries to make up excuses for her actions by drunkenly telling her favorite child, Tyler, that whatever she did, it was out of love for her family. To Liu's credit, she never tries to water this character down and manages to hold our sympathy throughout just by virtue of being Lucy Liu. While its experimental nature definitely means the Presence will be one of Soderbergh's more niche efforts, it's still technically impeccable and pretty moving once you settle into it. It's an interesting exercise for a director who, I have to say, never fails to innovate, and I give it a pretty solid 7 out of 10.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.